Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Spoop, the Friday the 13th fan films review. I'm your host, Don, and if you couldn't catch from that intro, I'm doing something special today. Happy Friday the 13th. In honor of the holiday, I subjected my wife to 13 Friday the 13th fan films so I could talk about them with you, my faithful viewers, and any new people that showed up. Hi, welcome. So this is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do on Let's Talk Spoop, and I'm extremely excited to jump on in. But before I do, I got to give some background on why there are so many Friday the 13th fan films. Essentially, if you're unfamiliar with the history, back in 2016, Victor Miller, the writer of the original Friday the 13th, decided he wanted the rights back to Friday the 13th. So he sent a notice to Manny Inc., which is now Horror Productions, Horror something. Sent to the company that now owns Manny Inc., which was the company he was working with when he made the original movie. The director slash producer, Sean Cunningham, said, this was a right for hire. This is our property. Got into a big dispute, and eventually Victor Miller won the rights to Friday the 13th, the original. He, however, does not own the rights to the sequels. That started, like I said, back in 2016. Before that, they were working real hard on trying to make something come together, and everything just kept falling apart. And so has been a long hiatus since the last Friday the 13th film. The last one being the remake in 2009. So it's been 15 whole years since we've had another Friday the 13th movie, and the fans of the franchise have gotten a little impatient. So they started making their own movies in order to try to keep the love of this franchise kicking. And that brings us here today to talk about these fan films. So, first we're going to talk about, these are in order of worst to best, in my personal opinion. And if you are interested in watching any of these, I watched every single one of them on YouTube, and I will put a link to the playlist that I created in the description down below. Please, Brian. Please. Because he posts this stuff. I don't. But I'll send him the link. Anyway, we're going to start with Nine Lives. So, Nine Lives is kind of a little bit of a bait and switch, and that it actually doesn't take place on Friday the 13th. It takes place on October 31st, which in this movie happens to be a Friday. So when the movie starts up, it gives you the Friday the 13th logo, and then it turns into 31, which is also why it's called Part 9, Nine Lives. Actually takes place on Halloween. There's a lot of nostalgia in the background, like posters and, memorabilia. And there's a random cameo from Lauren Marie Taylor, Lauren Marie Taylor being the survivor of part 2. But overall, this movie is a bloody mess. It's just hard to track what's going on, no idea what's going on. It just left a lot to be desired, and it ran way too long. There's no coherent plot really. And this movie's only an hour long. And I say it ran way too long. So that should give you an idea about how good this fan film is. Next up, we got Vorhees. Voorhees follows a group of criminals that kidnap two girls for some reason and decide to hole up in Crystal Lake. There are a couple of fun references to other slashers made. I think one of the girls works at Elm Street Bank, and the other one's last name is Myers. Really, the only positive I can give for this movie is that their maskless Jason design was really good. But overall, this movie is very hard to follow and it feels very drawn out. Should have been a short. My Special Boy. So My Special Boy follows two guys who were there when Jason died. And for some reason, they decided to open up Camp Crystal Lake again. And then Jason goes around killing them all. But really, besides that being an interesting concept, the only other really interesting thing about this movie is that the ghost of Pamela Voorhees is actually following Jason and egging him on to murder people. This is definitely a fan film, though. It is made by fans, not actors, and it shows. But at least it's watchable. His name was Jason. So when I started watching this one, I got very excited because I really liked the concept. The reason that I really liked Halloween Kills is because Halloween Kills dealt with the PTSD and the fallout of the boogeyman murdering people in this town and how they dealt with it years later. Same thing here, and his name was Jason. It's following around people who live near Crystal Lake that are kind of just dealing with the decline of their town and what it's like to live in this town. Great idea. Execution, not so much. This movie's very, very slow. It's about 90 ish minutes long, and you're about an hour into this movie before you even see Jason, and it's even longer before the first kill happens. So this movie's not bad, but it's definitely not great. Victim No More. So this is one I was really excited to see. It's the concept was great. So this movie is following a survivor's kid who is trying to prove that Jason is dead. Obviously, he is not. That survivor is Trish Jarvis, which is the sister of Tommy Jarvis from part four. It's got a nice filter to give that 80s feel. And essentially, the idea is that, as it says on the tagline, the body count must end. Victims or family members of victims have now are going to band together and stop Jason. There's only a few kills in this movie, not nearly enough, so it didn't really have the vibe I was hoping for. But it's only 40 minutes long. And we get a cameo, Kimberly Beck, who was the voice of Trish. Her voice is also in this, which is nice. We get a good nice callback. Fall of Camp Blood. So Fall of Camp Blood follows immediately after part four. And it's the cops and the emergency response personnel that are responding to the Jason attack in part four. So these cops know what's up, and the EMTs do not, and they're trying to prevent these EMTs from reviving Jason. The bad results. One of the cool concepts this plays with is the idea that people think that Tommy was actually the killer and that the Jason part was just a hoax. They use some filters, give it 80s feel. It's got good music, but again, this movie is clearly made by fans, not actors, which is really the one major drawback. The other one for me personally is that it retcons part of the established storyline, timeline, and that Jason comes back normal after his death in part four, which is not what happens. Jason doesn't really return until part six when he gets resurrected by Tommy on accident. So I didn't like that. But overall, not bad. Rose Blood. So this is another one that I was really excited to see. It's a direct sequel to part seven, New Blood, which is also known as Jason versus Carrie. Part seven was made when Paramount still owned the rights to Friday the 13th, and they were trying to work with New Line Cinemas to do a Freddy versus Jason. This was back in 1980, I want to say seven, late 80s, right? They're trying to do a crossover. And essentially, the two couldn't decide on who would actually produce it and who would have the rights to the story. And so it kind of fell apart. But what they could do is make something completely different. So they decided to copy Carrie by Stephen King and put her into this movie. Her name is Tina. So, what are good things about this movie? Well, it's a direct sequel, which is pretty cool. We got some good cameos. We get Lars Park Lincoln, who was the actress that played the original Tina. We have Kevin Spiritus, who played Nick, her like boyfriend. Terry Kaiser reprises his role as her doctor. And then we also get a Michael Myers cameo, which is kind of weird, but it's in there. One of the things I also really liked about this is that they're in this institute where the government is trying to harness Tina and another girl whose name is Rose's ability to summon unstoppable killing machines, i.e., Jason and Michael Myers. But one of the things they had in this that I really liked was they had a young black actor playing Duke, who is a key character in part 9. And so I thought it was really cool to connect part 9 back to part 7 because he kind of comes out of nowhere. In part 9, he somehow magically knows exactly what you have to do to officially stop Jason. And it's cool to give him like a backstory, like why he would know that. So I liked it. Overall, this movie's got some faults, but it's pretty solid. Part 10 to Hell and Back. This one, man, just hit me. So this one was made in 1995, making it the oldest fan film on my list, and it was made during the hiatus between Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. So I already talked about kind of the long hiatus that we've been on since the remake, but prior to that, there was a big gap, an 8 year gap between 9 and 10 where nothing came out. The reason that that big gap happened is because Paramount had given the rights to Friday the 13th to New Line Cinemas owned by Warner Brothers, and they wanted to make Freddy versus Jason, and they just couldn't figure out how to do it. New Nightmare came out during that period of time, and it just kept getting rewrites, and they just couldn't do it. And eventually, they made 9, which was supposed to be a lead directly into Freddy versus Jason. So we didn't get anything for 8 years. So this group of kids decided they were going to make their own part 10. This movie is obviously filmed on a handheld camera, but it's got a nice like lo-fi charm to it because of that. It is kind of weird that essentially everybody in this movie, with a couple of exceptions, are actual children that are probably 14, 15 years old getting killed by Jason, which is kind of a little weird. The plot here is that another group of kids get a hold of a book that gives them a spell to resurrect Jason and decide to resurrect Jason, and then he goes on a killing spree. I really enjoyed the ending to this movie, and all the music in this movie are callbacks to the original series soundtrack, various songs from various movies, and I really enjoyed this movie. It's not actually good, but I really enjoyed it, and that's why it's so high on my list. Vengeance. So, this is an interesting one. This follows Jason's dad, Elias, and his vendetta against the Jarvises. Elias is played by CJ Graham. CJ Graham is my favorite actor that has played a Jason. I know everybody loves Kane Hodder. I love CJ Graham. He played Jason in part 6, the original zombie Jason, and I just loved him in that movie. There's a surprising amount of nudity and sex in this movie. There's boobs, I think, in the first 5 minutes. Cool thing though is that Tommy's daughter, Ashley, is played by the same actress that played Rose in Rose Blood. And essentially, what's happening in this movie is that Tommy's kids are teaming up with other family members of other victims to try and, of course, fail to take on Jason. Kills in this are pretty good. The costume's okay. However, Vengeance Part 2 is a significant improvement over Part 1. It's a direct continuation from Part 1. There's a scene with the elder sister where that shows like she has a healing cut from being involved with the fight with Jason at the end of the first one. We get more cameos. We get the return of Tom Matthews, who played Tommy Jarvis in Part 6. We get a cameo from Darcy DeMoss, who played a gal named Nikki in Part 6, who died, but apparently didn't, according to these guys. And then Tom McLaughlin also makes an appearance in this, him having been the writer and director of Part 6. And once again, CJ Graham reprises his role as Elias. Music in this, very good. Costume, significantly improved. Fascination with having sex on a YouTube video, gone. More death. Overall, significantly better than part one. Strongly recommend, but you can't really watch it without watching part one. Jason Rising. So, of all of the movies on this list, this was the one I was the most excited to see. So, Jason Rising is made or was directed and I think written by a guy named James Sweet, and it was done in collaboration with Womp Stomp Studios. Womp Stomp Studios being the group that did the Never Hike Alone movies. And me being a follower of Womp Stomp Studios, I listened to Vincent DeSante talk about this movie constantly. He says that it's the best one ever made, but obviously he's being self deprecating, but still, comes highly recommended. What's it about? Three female convicts escape from a prison and decide to hole up in Camp Crystal Lake. So we have these three convicts, one of their sister, and then we have the officers, the U.S. Marshals, and the corrections officers that are trying to hunt them down. Who also, everybody ends up encountering Jason. This movie's got great kills in it. One guy gets killed, Jason rips his spine out and then proceeds to use said spine to beat another man to death. He gets help from the headless corpse of Pamela Voorhees, which is just an interesting concept to add into this. We get some good fan service. Adrienne King, who played Alice in the original, makes a comeback as Alice. And then also we get some Pamela Voorhees action. The actress that plays her is kind of weirdly young, but I accept it. It's Jason's memories, so it makes sense. Really, the only negative in this movie is some of the shots aren't that great. They tried to recreate the classic scene of Jason just breaking through a door rather than like walking through it or rather than opening it, just bust straight through via Spartan kick. And it's just kind of almost laughably badly filmed. That scene was just not great. But overall, this is a top tier fan film. If you are going to watch Friday the 13th fan films, you have to see Jason Rising. But of course, I cannot talk about Friday the 13th fan films without talking about Never Hike Alone, The Ghost Cut. If you're going to watch Never Hike Alone, you got to watch The Ghost Cut. Ghost Cut is a collection of 3 shorts, as I said previously, made by Womp Stomp Studios. Overall, everything about this movie is fantastic. Great kills. We get a 1v1 hiker versus Jason, which is some of the absolute best POV footage I've ever seen in a horror film. We get Jason in the snow. We get Jason's How I Spent My Summer Vacation. We get an epic cameo at the very end with Tom Matthews. If not for the sequel, this would be the gold standard, the absolute best Friday the 13th fan film out there. But of course, we have the sequel, Never Hike Alone 2. Never Hike Alone 2 is the gold standard of Friday the 13th fan films. Directly follows part 1, follows the hiker who gets rescued by Tommy Jarvis, and then follows Tommy Jarvis with again the triumphant return of Tom Matthews. It's got great fights throughout this hospital, just great kills overall. Great showdowns with the cops coming to realize what's going on. Just everything in this movie, top to bottom, left to right, side to side, fantastic. If you are going to watch any Friday the 13th fan films, you have to watch Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2. So that's it. That's all 13 in order, worst to best, that I saw and subjected my poor wife to. Have you seen any of these? Please let me know in the comments down below. Are there some that you've seen that you think I should check out? Let me know. We got another Friday the 13th this year, I'm pretty sure. December? Let me know. I will gladly watch it and talk about them. I love this franchise and I cannot wait to see more. After you've seen this, go check them out. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Think about liking, think about subscribing. Did you like this format? If you did, we're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We need about 200, 250 more. And if we hit 5,000 subscribers, I will do another film in this format talking about cursed horror movies. I'm excited to make it, but I won't do it unless I get my 5,000 subscribers. So what I need is for you to tell two friends. And then I need those two friends to tell two friends. And then I need those two friends to tell two friends. And that's like 300 people right there. Thanks for sticking around. Okay, thanks. Bye.